Okay, let's begin with one of the collects for Good Friday from a New Zealand prayer book. Let us pray. Merciful God, creator of all the peoples of the earth and lover of every soul, have compassion on all who do not know you. Let your gospel be preached with grace and power to those who have not heard it. Turn the hearts of those who oppose it, and bring home to your fold all who have gone astray. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
So, we did not meet last week, and I'm so sorry about that. So I'll just, oops, got a trigger finger today. So I thought maybe it would be useful just to go back and see if there's anything left over from our last session at the end of January that anyone wants to revisit. So then we talked about Peter's denial being the prediction of Peter's denial, and then Jesus praying in Gethsemane. And you'll remember this was when he says, "Can you not stay awake with me?" And it's when he prays to let this cup pass him by, but not what I want, but what you want. In that famous moment. Is there anything left over from that session that we want to revisit?
Just
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Ellie.
just a detailed question. If you'd scroll up for just a second, there, 26, when they had sung the hymn, other texts we've read say that it's saying a hymn. Was there a tradition? Is there a traditional hymn that one sings at the Passover meal?
That's a great question. And I don't have a quick and easy answer to that, but I bet Amy Jill Levine might. Let me see. Let's see.
Know what it was then, but there's currently one that I've heard several times.
Let's see.
I knew.
All Amy Jill Levine says is that although this is a later tradition, the early first century Jewish writer Philo states that the Passover meal was accompanied by prayers and hymns, plural. So she does not specify that there's one particular hymn, but maybe just, the way we would sing the closing hymn, maybe that's what Mark means here. It's a great question. And I don't know.
It may just be that translation because I've got a hymn, and in the gospel parallels, Matthew has sung a hymn. So, and my translation otherwise follows closely to the one that we've got on the screen.
Which translation do you use, John?
It's whatever they use in the gospel parallels.
It may be the Revised.
It's very close to what you've got. I just am not sure.
I'm always curious, and as you know, I love to look at different translations. I don't know which one this was. Well, so that's my sense, is that it's sort of, referring
I'm
to
sorry, mine's Revised Standard Version 1952.
Okay, and this is the new Revised Standard, so that's one of the little editorial tweaks they made.
I've been to several Passovers over the year, several Seders, and one of the songs that is always sung, and it probably isn't that old, but it is called Dayenu. It would have been enough. And they go through the 10 plagues. If first God sent the frogs, and that would have been enough. But then they go through that. So it's a mnemonic of the Passover story set to music for better memory.
Oh, thank you for that. Wonderful.
Dayenu.
Da'enu. Anything else about last time's reading that we want to look at again? Okay, hearing nothing. I thought what would be helpful, I'm going to share with us for a second 14th century painting by Giotto, The Arrest of Christ from the Scrivani Chapel. And I just would love for us to spend a moment or two observing what we notice in this painting, remembering, of course, that no painting is an absolutely faithful rendering of the scriptural text, but I do think it kind of helps prime the pump for our conversation. So let me move this, and I can make this a little bigger if that helps. What do y'all notice here in this rendering? This is called the arrest of Christ.
Judas is almost enveloping Jesus
Yeah.
with his cloak.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a full-on bear hug. Uh, it makes me a little uncomfortable how intimate that moment is. Yeah. And right in the center, too. So it draws our attention to that moment.
Who's the anonymous purple figure on the left?
Ah, I had a feeling that someone would pick up on that right away. Yeah, great question. Who is this right here? And you can just see the cloak being grabbed. Just
I was thinking
even,
of the grabber.
okay, this one. Yeah. So who is he? Um, Sort of an ominous looking figure. And then who's the grabby as well?
Mhm.
It must be one of the apostles because they have there are 3 halos in the.
Yeah.
Jesus has a halo, the person being grabbed has a halo, and it looks all the way to the left. There's a piece of another halo, though it could be something
Yeah.
else.
This is actually right here is a different person than this one. It's hard to see on the screen, but this is somebody who's actually headed out of the frame. And this guy is, who knows what he's doing. Looks like
Oh, that's Peter yanking the guy's
But
ear off.
oh, that
Right.
is Peter.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yep, that's Malchus, the slave, and he's doing what Jesus tells him not to do. Anything else that anyone sees?
Someone's blowing a shofar.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that too.
I don't see that. Where is that happening?
That
Right.
big white horn. Either that or he's got a beer bong.
Maybe oh, I see it now. Yes, thank you. No, could be, yeah.
That might be the quote of the day, Fred. I love that. Well, we are in Ellie's dining room today, and before the rest of you logged on, she was showing me their collection or their partial collection of beer glasses. So, keeping with that theme, there we go. So, you can get that. All right. Anything else?
Reminds me of an Ignite the Right march.
Yeah.
They've got
Or-
their tiki torches and
Yeah.
Or all the Frankenstein mobs with pitchforks
Yeah.
and torches.
Yeah.
there's another guy with a club. If that's Peter cutting somebody's ear off, I always thought he had a sword.
Yeah, that's just a little knife he's got.
Yeah, he's just, but then somebody else has a club that he looks like I'm not sure which side he's on though.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Hard to know. Okay. And well, anything else? Last call?
You haven't told us who the purple figure is.
Well, I don't know. So we're gonna go ahead and read the next section and see what we think, and we can come back and look at this again. I don't know who this is. I have
The
a feeling
costume
I know
for
who
the
this is. Huh?
the person is wearing a shorter robe, so it looks like and a cloak and a hood. So it looks like he might be a guard of some sort because the working stiff wore shorter robes, and in the 14th century anyway.
Oh,
And if you were official, then you got one of the long purple robes like the guy on the right.
so how do you come upon this knowledge, Ellie? That's really interesting to me.
Oh, it's just from looking at medieval paintings.
I did not know that about the shorter cloak.
Then the guy right in the middle in the red with the gold.
This guy? Or this guy?
No, that one.
Yeah, him.
I mean, I figured the people with a lot of embroidery and fancy stuff were the officials.
For the priests.
Plus, it looks like he's wearing a beaver on his head.
Some interesting headgear.
Interesting idea.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the text, and if you don't mind, try to keep these two here. The guy, the guy with the hood, and then whoever this is, scooching off the scene. Keep them in mind as we read, and then we can maybe think again about what's going on. Um, so I believe we're starting here at 43. Would somebody? Oops! Now I made it too big. Let me make it smaller again. There we go. Okay. Would somebody like to read this section, the betrayal and arrest of Jesus, for us?
Okay, how far do you want to go down?
If you want to stop right here at 52, that would be perfect.
Okay.
At the end of 52.
Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
Thank you. Fred, can you remind me which translation you use? I love hearing the different versions.
New International Version, NIV.
Got it. Because the place where I at least noticed the difference is when when you read that Jesus said, am I leading a rebellion? And that really caught my ear. So what do you all notice here or wonder about here?
That caught my ear too, and I saw that the alternate translation was "as I were abandoned," but I understand. I have read in some places that the bandit may be a mistranslation for a insurrectionist. The
Crucifixion was generally, reserved for rebellion and insurrection.
Yeah, that's the context that I have understood too.
Let's see, that's verse 48. Let's see what the Greek says. Robber, plunderer, freebooter, brigand. Interesting. Not
But not rebel.
not rebel. Interesting. I don't know, if that means anything. Just
I think it does point to the usefulness of some historical sources to buffer this. If crucifixion was more or less reserved for rebellion, that adds a dimension.
Well, remember when they come up and bring him before Pilate? Pilate asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
Yeah.
Are you against the civil order, basically?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they crucified him to robbers.
Yeah. Well,
that's what I was thinking too, Ellie. At the end of Luke's gospel, Jesus is crucified between two thieves, and so that's just another piece of the puzzle. We do know that crucifixion was really meant to set an example, obviously a deterrent, and people would be crucified on the outskirts of town so that anyone coming up to Jerusalem would see that, like, okay, don't you mess with us here. It's such a horrific, brutal way of death, of execution.
And that's who was being grabbed in the side of the painting.
Yeah. So what do we think? What's Mark doing here with this guy? Certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. Why is he only wearing a linen cloth? They caught hold of him. He left the linen cloth and ran off naked, as my southern friends would say. Um,
Why is he even in there?
yeah, yeah.
He, he is not in Matthew and he is not in Luke.
No, he's not, nor is he in John. Um, so yeah, why? And Mark again, who is so sparing of details, right? He doesn't waste anything. Why did he add him in? And I don't have the answer key. That's a legitimate question. I've got lots of people's theories, but I'd love to hear what we think.
Could it be Mark himself?
That is one of the theories that scholars have raised. Yep, that this is like a cameo appearance that Mark writes himself into the story. So when you ask that question, Ellie, why do you think he would do that?
Well, if he was in fact one of his disciples and knew him, then it would be like Peter's epiphany too. I mean,
Mhm.
in not in the biblical sense, but in the psychological sense.
Mhm.
This is one of those tearing memories that he's still trying to get over.
Hmm. That he regrets, perhaps.
That he ran away,
Yeah.
and just to emphasize how humiliating the whole process was. He's thinking, oh, Grant, and I was naked too. I mean, it's like a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and this comes right after he says, and they all forsook him and fled. And it almost could start, but a young man followed him.
Yeah.
So that if everybody else fled, who is the young man following? I assume it is Jesus,
Mhm.
but he gets grabbed and manhandled as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a young man, a certain young man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're expected to
To know.
it's expected to be revealed later on why this is important.
It's
That's interesting.
if
Well, it says just a young man.
Yeah. So Fred, what does the NIV say there? Does it say certain?
No, it just says a young man.
So that's the NRSV's insertion. That's how it's interpreting that. Yeah, a certain young man. It does make you think, okay, who is this certain young man? That's not
if
just a
What
throwaway.
does the original Greek say? Why did they put certain in there?
Yeah, that's the question. The original Greek just says a young man. Um,
it's I don't know about the certain, but from thinking of Mark as the storyteller, this is where he would insert a wry smile, like,
mhm.
and I know who that was.
Mhm.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like the apostle, the disciple that Jesus loved. I mean, everybody knows who that was.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Wow, if that is in fact Mark, that is quite a revealing, literally and figuratively, moment of confession almost,
I
right?
gather this is not one of these sandwiches.
Well, that's a question too, Fred, and that's other scholars have said exactly that, that stay tuned. You may see this guy again. So I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility. Again, truly, I don't have a particular interpretation in my. I mean, my my seminary professors had certain interpretations, and scholars have various insights, and so that's why it's interesting for us to noodle around with it. So it may be a sandwich. This is Mark, and he loves his sandwiches. We've also been, Mark has told the story pretty much through the vantage point of the disciples and, their inability to get it. And, how many times Jesus predicts his arrest and his crucifixion and resurrection, at least three times that we know of. And they still, aren't getting it. So, this may be making it really explicit about how people ran away and didn't understand what was happening. um, but that image of leaving the linen cloth And some painters do render the naked guy. I spared us that this morning. But I love this because he's going right off the frame of the painting. It's just like, I'm out of here. And that guard or whomever just pulls him back, or at least pulls his cloth. I mean, and so the implication is that the cloth comes off and off he goes.
Well,
Right there, that
it's
sign
a
note.
purple cloth
Yeah.
in this painting, which would have been, a rare and, aristocratic color.
Yeah, and so that's what's interesting about how Giotto chooses to interpret this. Of course, Mark doesn't give us that color. In when we were reading Acts, Luke talks about the merchants of purple cloth and all of that, and so we get that rich detail about color, but we don't here. It's just a linen cloth. But Giotto has decided to make it purple, which is also interesting because
Oh.
it does imply something about its value.
I wonder if Ellie, do you have any insight of who would have been wearing a linen cloth? I mean, or could we think of this in terms of say, a servant with a loincloth or something, rather than a
I don't
higher
think,
official? I mean, is there any implication there?
it's curious that he specifies linen because that was, I think that even in that day, linen was not that common a cloth.
What did they use for cloth? I mean,
I'm
they
not-
didn't have cotton yet.
Are you sure? I don't know.
I thought cotton was from the New World.
No.
No,
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 you
it was from the Middle East, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you never hear them speaking in the Bible of cotton. You only hear of
No,
linen.
you don't. It's
Yeah.
Well, it's flax. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Let's look at what the Greek says.
a linen sheet. It says there. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it.
Ah,
Okay, here we go.
Well, it's
Definition:
his nightshirt. So yeah.
linen cloth, pardon, especially that which was fine and costly, going back to what Fred was saying, in which the bodies of the dead were wrapped. Interesting. So it has a connotation of a shroud. And then the other definition here, thing made of fine cloth, of a light and loose garment worn at night over a naked body. So the nightshirt, the undergarment. Hi, Jim. Interesting. Elin has just joined us,
Oh, good.
or is trying to join us. There she is.
Morning, Elin.
So that connotation of the shroud is interesting too.
Mhm.
Oh, I know what I wanted to do. Wanted to see. So it's a word that's not used very often at all. Mark uses it more than anybody else. Let's see where else he uses it. Okay. So it's also used of the burial cloth. He bought fine linen. I'm assuming this is Joseph of Arimathea. Took Jesus down, wrapped him in the linen, laid him in the sepulcher. Yeah.
I'm Googling. It says, what did medieval Arabs wear? Usually linen or cotton tunics, sometimes silk or hemp.
Silk.
But yeah, they had cotton.
well, I guess they did.
But you're right. You never hear that. You never hear cotton referenced in scripture. There she is. Hey, Elin.
Oh, I'm sorry, something unforeseen arose, and I'm
Yeah,
fine
we're
now.
just so glad that you're here. I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And I had emailed you because I was having Wi-Fi problems and I was worried that you tried to get in earlier and then didn't have success. So we're all here now. I hope Donna's okay. I haven't heard whether she had something else going on, but
Oh, there's a message on my phone. It might be Donna. Let me just
Okay.
grab the phone. Shall I grab it?
okay. All right. Now everyone's frozen again. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Good. Okay. Good. Excellent. Well, you all are frozen, but as long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. Okay. Ellie just defrosted. But but Fred and
That's
John and
right.
Ray are all frozen in place in my screen. It's so odd. I don't know why. So does the fact that this same word is used for a burial shroud add anything for us, or what do you think?
Think so, not for me.
Other than foreshadowing, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But what was foreshadowing? I mean, linen
The-
was a common material.
Well, but the death and the burial and the wrapping in the cloth and into the tomb.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the only other time Mark uses it. And so that's what's interesting is that, Mark uses it here and then uses it at the burial. So, going back to what you said, Fred, about the sandwich, maybe that's what's going on. We'll see.
Well, that would be a big sandwich
It would be a huge
for the
thing.
next time.
Yeah, because as we know, Mark 14 is a very big chapter. Um, and so we still have a ways to go before we get to the crucifixion and the death and the burial. So it would be a huge sandwich. Lots and lots of layers. All right, anything else here before we move on?
Sorry, I just listened to Donna's message and she's had some conflict there at home with the computer and Annie and the dad. So
Got it.
she just can't log in.
Totally understood.
Mm,
Okay, I hope
mhm.
that gets resolved. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us know because we always worry when people are usually here and then aren't. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So, shall we move on to the council? Would somebody like to read this section from 53 down through the end of 65?
Okay, I can read that.
Thank you. Can you see it okay, Elin?
Yeah, they took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' Jesus said, 'I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him and to blindfold him and to strike him and to say him, 'Prophesy.' The guards also took him over and beat him.
Thank you, Elin. So again, this is a familiar scene, but is there anything that stands out or that you notice or heard differently than you might have heard before?
I think one of the things this underscores is that I have understood this to be Roman authority that came and seized him,
Mm-hmm.
soldiers, and turned him over to the high priest. So we have, long before he gets to Pilate, it's clear that the condemnation is coming from the religious officials, the establishment.
Mm-hmm. And that's really an important sequence to bear in mind, I think. And
The
because,
Jews would, oh, sorry.
no, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Fred. No, go ahead.
No, the Jews would not have been allowed to condemn him to death. That was strictly a Roman prerogative, as I understand it. So they have to find something. But what strikes me is Jesus is sick of pussyfooting around.
Yeah.
They ask him a direct question and they actually get an answer.
Which is very rare in this gospel, right? Yeah, it's really striking. I agree.
Although, do we know that there were Roman soldiers involved? I don't think the earlier passage, the den of just said a crowd and scribes and priests.
Had there been soldiers, they wouldn't have needed clubs.
Let's see.
There's
That's a good
crowd
point.
with swords and clubs.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
From
swords
people.
were expensive. There might be a few of them for the Jews, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of them.
let's see. Looking at 44, now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, "This one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard."
Well, just above there, Patty, I think it says there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders, at least in that version.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Fred's right about the swords. Mostly, anybody who would own a sword they're expensive, and it is more likely that a guard would have a sword than just your own ordinary corner Joe.
You run of the mill member of the rabble. So,
Good
John, what do the other synoptics say here? Did they mention soldiers?
Let's see, they say they greeted a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders and the people. That's Matthew, virtually identical. Luke says, while we're speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading him. And that's all it says.
Okay.
Wow. Where does that image of soldiers come from then? That's lore that has crept into my mind anyhow.
It may be John. Let me take a look.
Again, that may have arisen from the idea that whoever was carrying a sword was probably a guard.
Yeah. Well, it may just be, yeah.
Let's
But
see.
it could be the high priest, I'm assuming, had guards or whatever to,
I would
Yeah.
think so.
treasure.
Oh, yeah. But
The high
these,
priest. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, these versions do make it clear that it was a crowd and they were from the high priest. Again, if the Romans aren't involved yet, that it underscores what's happening.
Here's
And
where
why?
we get. No, I'm sorry, Ray. Here's where we get the soldiers. We get them from John. I thought so. So
Okay.
John says, after Jesus had spoken these words, it's when he prays his high priestly prayer to God the Father. He went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and the disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew this place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with
Bingo.
police from so soldiers and police from the chief priests and the Pharisees. And they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So that's where, I think we always get we put everything in the blender and hit pulse. We get all of these gospel versions and they kind of get amalgamated in our minds, certainly mine. And so this is really good to tease this out and see what Mark says.
So they were soldiers, but not Roman soldiers.
Yeah, they may have been, to use the word that John uses, they may have been police and guards of the chief priests, because to John's point, they must have had some, protective service.
Like our cathedral police.
Was it John that has Jesus heal the guy with the ear?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let me see. Yes, because we learn his name is Malchus there. I just can't find. John's version is rather lengthy, so I just can't see it at the moment, but I'll find it. But yes, that's absolutely right, that in John's gospel, Jesus reaches out and heals his ear. Oh, okay, so anything else here?
I love that Jesus going, I am again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And to Fred's point, this is finally, he just comes out and says it. And this has been building and building and building, and all of the secrecy earlier on in Mark. It's like, um, but it's interesting to me too, because the testimony here, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple and I will build another, which isn't exactly what Jesus says. And then, of course,
Right, because I remember we looked at that earlier and I said, where's the part about the rebuilding in 3
yeah,
days?
yeah,
And it's interesting that it was the false testimony.
exactly, exactly. But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Very human. And the high priest tears his clothes. Why do you suppose he does that?
Sign of
Heard-
distress.
He's heard blasphemy.
There's no doubt this is blasphemy, according to conventional Jewish thought.
Well, when
Yeah.
he's asked directly, "Are you the Messiah?" and he says, "I am." Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But also it's the great I am
Hmm.
phrase
Yeah.
that crops up. It's
And yet when Pontius Pilate
background
asks,
ta-da,
yeah,
in the movie, the music is going to go blue.
Yeah, exactly,
Well, and
exactly.
it's also the Son of Man, seated at the power, the vision from Daniel of what the Messiah is going to do.
That apocalyptic moment, right, where all that is wrong with the world is going to be restored and made right. Sort of this great reversal. Yep.
but here he is claiming, the mantle. And yet when he gets to Pilate, he's going to start, speaking in riddles again.
Well, that's in John. Um, so again, it's so interesting how they each paint it differently, right? Um, so yeah. Um, and yeah, but this is this moment, right, where he's, claiming the mantle. And to Ellie's point, you can almost see the sky opening and the light shining and the chorus. Whoa! Yeah, it is that moment of theophany, right? Revelation of God. And then immediately followed by this accusation of blasphemy.
It is blasphemy.
It is. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I'm not
it's
saying
not,
it's not. Yeah. But just, the juxtaposition of that very brief moment of Jesus stating who he is, and then, the tearing of the clothes, it's highly dramatic for sure. Um, yeah. Anything else here? Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, to strike him, saying, prophesy, and then he is beaten. Okay, why don't we read? We can finish Mark 14 today, which would be great because we've spent about 3 weeks on this chapter, but with good reason. Would someone like to finish this chapter?
I'll give it a try.
Thank you.
When Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And he went out into the forecourt. And then the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again, he denied it. Then after a little while the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you're one of them, for you're a Galilean." But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. And Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept.
Thank you. Anything strike you here?
All of it.
Yeah, between the eyes.
Right. There's that club that we saw in the beginning. Maybe
I'll
it,
give you, I mean, one thing out of the parallels, the cock crowing twice only appears in Mark.
hmm,
The other ones just say, you're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows. I don't know why having it happen twice makes a difference, but I just point that out.
The NIV doesn't have the first cock's crow.
Yeah, mine didn't either, although it notes it in a footnote that some scripts add that in.
But then he said immediately, then they do say he crowed a second time. So
Yeah,
for
so
what
they
it's
just
worth.
they just stick the first one in because just to make it clear that it actually did.
But
It looks
it's
like
a little,
it
sorry.
sorry, I'm just saying that because the cock is crowing, it's getting to be dawn. So it's been a very long night.
great observation. Yeah.
It's also a little miracle story. It's if he had predicted that the cock would crow twice, set a scene, and then this fulfilled here. So it's a minor miracle, I would say, and it makes it memorable.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice.
Thinking about what you always remind us, Ray, that this would have been told orally as a story. It's that kind of device that does make it memorable. So I just thought it would be helpful to go back and look at what we read last time about the denial. Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered." That comes from Zechariah, I believe. "But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Even though all become deserters, I will not." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this day, this very night," and again that rhetorical repetition adds emphasis, "before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." But he, Peter, said vehemently, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all of them said the same.
I have to apologize if I bring that storytelling
Oh, it's
thing
good.
in too often. And simply for me, it loosens up, it opens up the possibility of other meanings if we don't have to take everything literally as was said or done this way, but as the story was related, it was framed this way. This is the frame, the picture, the substance was put in. So I apologize if people were irritated by that.
No, not at all. I
Yeah.
think it's
No, I thought
tremendously
it's
helpful.
a
Yeah.
good explanation of why this particular detail of it's once and then twice. I mean, you can really remember that a whole lot easier than you can something else.
Yep. No, I not at all. Exactly
Okay,
the
well
contrary, Ray.
that's
Not at
good.
all irritated. No, I think that's because we know that this is, we know that this is how the Gospels were handed down generation to generation until they were written. So we have to bear that in mind as we're thinking about it. And so the only reason I called attention to the fact that you said that is that I think it's so helpful that we need to think about that. And this is sort of a storytelling device, and as when we were talking about the certain young man, and as someone is spinning a story, there are phrases and repetitions that you use to help people get it and remember. And this is a great example of that.
Well, and also to my understanding and by experience, I I respect oral tradition, and this stuff was transmitted orally, as we know, long before it was written down.
Yep.
And one of the oral traditions have truth in them and power, but the details are like the details in the painting we just saw. Nobody was dressed in medieval costumes. Nobody looked like an Italian. Nobody, you know, all of that is gloss, and the substance is in there, and it helps me to remember that. And I mean, I have wonderful stories, family lore, sitting around as a kid listening to the ancients who were born in the 1870s talking about baseball games in their youth. And those are passed down. I remember those. My kids know about those. Why is it important? Not at all. But the truth of what happened and who the character was is captured in that.
Yep.
And I trust that I won't go on, but it's
No, go ahead, please.
I just believe in the power of oral storytelling and oral history.
Mhm.
And if I am allowed to stand back from it, I get much more out of the picture. If it's more like a landscape vision rather than see the forest rather than the twigs.
Mm-hmm.
But the twigs do make up the forest, and these turns of
Absolutely.
phrase are what give perspective, some depth.
That's it.
Oh, that's
I think that's
precise-
the balance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's precisely why I and Karen and others found that congregational storytelling we did last week so powerful for that very reason, is that the people who were telling their version of the story of St. Dunstan's, and each person had their individual vantage point. And isn't that exactly what's happening here in Scripture, right? Is that we're looking at the same gem from different facets, or different facets of the gem, and that's exactly what's happening here. And yeah, and we should. I'll have to find. There's a wonderful video of a man who has made his life's work telling the Gospel of Mark as a story, and I don't know if it's online. I have the DVD, but who has DVDs anymore? I don't even have a DVD player. I can't do anything with it. But I'll have to find that and get his name, because it's so interesting to see him. Do this. I've watched the video a few times, and it's such a reminder of the oral transmission of the story. So I will look for that. And hopefully it dwells online somewhere, because otherwise it's lost, because I can't watch a DVD. Anything else here as we wrap up chapter 14? Amy Jill Levine makes the point, and I think it's a powerful one. If Ellie was talking before about if this were a movie and the music would swell and all that. If this were a movie, you could almost see the split screen, that just as Jesus is being accused, so too is Peter, and Peter's natural defense is to deny and say, no, 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 I'm not the one. I don't understand what you're talking about. And these are really happening at the same time, because Mark makes that clear, because this is all going on sort of upstairs and Peter's below in the courtyard. And the simultaneity of that, or at least the close proximity, is striking.
There's another thing that is just popped into my head as you were pointing that out, is that yes, Peter, we know about the denials. We know that they all fled from the crowd that sees Jesus. So Peter was scattered. Peter is back there, and he's put his body into the situation. Whether his mouth is there yet, is another question. But Peter's got his life on the line too, because they have identified him.
Yep.
And he didn't. I mean, they may have all run away, but Peter followed and
Yeah,
is still kind of on keeping an eye on him. And it just, when he gets identified, that's the test that he doesn't pass. But the being with him is that he passed.
Yeah. He is
Yeah.
he's very close by, right? He's
Yeah,
not right there with Jesus, but he's down below. He may, who knows if he could hear what was going on above, maybe not. But, just his proximity, I think that's a really important point.
This would have been a great place for that certain young man to reappear.
Hmm.
And,
Have to find
I
him.
wonder if since we don't have Mark before 200 written down, I wonder if there was another part that the scribes just decided wasn't as interesting and just kind of dropped him out.
I thought you were going to propose a streaker coming into the crowd there.
I was gonna say, we have to do something-
Ray, you
have
never
to do
have
some
to
dance
grow
first.
old, Ray.
That's right. That's the theme for today. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ray and I will streak and, with bad knees and and bad feet. And a notable
Yeah.
lack of interest from everybody else.
Laughter from everybody, Fred.
Oh,
Laughter.
stop. Stop. And someone will have the beer bong. So
Yeah.
that'll be the Tuppers. They'll have the beer bong.
That's right.
But on at least back to the scripture though, Peter is sitting there with the guards.
Yes.
Yeah. They're all around him. And here comes the maid said, "Oh, he's one of them too."
Yep.
Yeah.
But he would have been able to fit in with them because he was kind of a scruffy looking type anyway, and big and bulky, and I think he thought that he could sort of infiltrate and kind of get a little bit closer and find out what was going on.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Can you
Totally good.
imagine what that must have been like for him, though? Because he thinks that he's just, I'm just going to warm my hands over here and pay no attention to me. Thank you very much. And then he's outed. And so, when you think about it that way, it's probably little wonder that his first impulse is to say, no, not me. He's trying very hard to save his neck at this point.
I do not know or understand what you are talking about.
Ah.
But he's cursing and swearing an oath in the temple precincts.
Our gov-
That's
excuse me.
pretty serious. Cursing, I would think in the temple would be, a punishable offense.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, where that boundary is, right? Would it
Yeah,
have been
back
okay
then.
in the courtyard, but not in the actual temple itself? But you're right, it's all part of the precincts. Good
I
question.
mean, my image is, like when they have fires in an oil drum. Probably they didn't have oil drums back then, but everybody is sort of warming themselves around the fire, and
A little
the
brazier.
day shift is coming in and getting ready to do their thing. And
Yep. Yep.
My version of the translation is that not that he cursed, but that he invoked a curse on himself. May I be struck down if I
may I be crucified upside down if I'm not telling the truth.
Right. Exactly.
wait.
I'm not worthy to be crucified in the same manner as my Lord. Let's just see. Let's see. The Greek says, dun, dun, come on.
Funny that cursing and swearing seem to be the same thing these days, but it wasn't at all.
So, second definition here ties in with what John was saying, to declare oneself liable to the severest divine penalties. Anathematizo. So, related to anathema, clearly. Interesting. Anything else there? Of course, we can always pick up again here next week as we move forward with chapter 15. So, looking at the calendar, we have a few weeks left before Lent, and I think it's reasonable to think we will actually finish Mark between now and Wednesday. Would you all like to read Job in Lent? There seemed to be some energy for that last time.
Quite happy
would
with
like
what
Job.
you said.
I'm going to be gone for about 3 weeks.
Oh, that's right. You're on your big ride. Would you
So-
rather wait until you get back? Because I know you've wanted to read Job, Fred.
I've wanted to read Job. I may follow along. I also would like to read James
Mm-hmm.
as a rebuttal to Paul.
Well,
But that would be convenient for every as a interim if you wanted to read it without me, I'm afraid.
Which, James or Job?
James. Job is, it's going to take a while to get through Job.
Oh, especially the way we work. Yeah, I think that's right. Elin, you were saying something before I didn't quite catch.
No, I'm quite happy to go along with
Oh,
Joe, but I'm also quite happy to do James in the interim, since Fred is taking his leave of absence.
Well, they did, we were off. I didn't have to make any coffee, Elin.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Taking your vacation at the right time is a skill.
Yeah,
That's right. And so just as we come back together in person, Fred will be hightailing it to Florida. So Elin will be on.
Mhm.
All right. Well, what do you think? Should we? Well, first we have to finish Mark. Let's do that first. But should we think about James next? But then again, I hate for you to miss that, Fred, because you
Oh,
talk.
I can follow along on, on your recast, your
You just won't get the benefit.
replay, but you won't get the benefit of my observations,
I
which I
know.
know Ray will hate.
And I will too. We will miss your observations, but you can always email us your observations, I suppose, or text them to us.
It's a nice friend that we can anticipate each other.
That's the benefit of community.
Yes, it
All
is.
right. Well, okay. So maybe we've got kind of a roadmap ahead. We can decide more definitively next week or the following week. But next week we'll hit chapter 15 and with an eye toward finishing Mark before Ash Wednesday, which I think is feasible even for us. So we are motivated. All right, dear ones, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
And my
Patty.
Thank you.
apologies
Some of you
again.
Sunday. And Ellie, I'll be in touch with more about what we were talking about.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Great. I'll
Thank
keep that in mind. Thank you.